Good morning, everybody. I am Keith Fielder. I'm the County Extension Coordinator for Putnam County. I'm involved in extension apicultural educational efforts across the state. As Laura said earlier, I'm a certified honey judge. I am a Georgia master beekeeper, and I have enjoyed beekeeping since I was a small child. It is one of my great escapes in life, and I'm still a student of beekeeping every day as I go by. I learn more and more about it. I think when the average person thinks about honeybees, they automatically think about honey. And that's a great thing because honey is a wonderful food product. It's probably one of our healthiest sweeteners that we have. But I get questioned quite often about just exactly what honey is. So if we go to the next slide, please. Honey, just like when we think about wine grapes and the different varietals and the different wines that we get from those grapes, very much the same thing happens with the nectar that bees gather and bring into the hive. Honey is simply the flavor of flowers, and each different nectar source contributes a different flavor. They can also contribute a different color of nectar that comes in. And honey is at one time a complicated substance that we'll talk about in a minute, but it's fairly simple preparation that the bees go through. They bring the nectar in. It is swapped back and forth between bees, and in this process, the bees add some special enzymes to it. That helps to break down the sugar that as it comes into the colony into more simple sugars. The bees deposit it in the honeycomb, and they stand on top of the comb and fan their wings and move a tremendous volume of air through that colony to help desiccate or dry out that honey just by fanning their wings. When they get that nectar dried down to about 18.3% moisture or below, they will cap it with brand new beeswax, and then they will store that as their carbohydrate source, their energy source for the year. And that's where we borrow a little bit. We call it surplusing honey. And the bees will put a lot of it away, and then we'll borrow some of that from them for our own table. Next slide, please. Well, as I said, honey is a fairly complex compound, and there's a lot of chemistry that goes on in that hive. The main enzyme that the bees add to honey is an enzyme called invertase. And as nectars come into the colony, they are about 98 to 99% sucrose, same sucrose that you'll find on your kitchen table in the sugar bowl. And the invertase helps to break this down further into glucose and fructose and some other more simple sugars. And its biggest contributing fact, though, is that it helps this solution hold more solids and thus be able to pack more energy into that stored product. Another one that really is one that's come to light here lately as being somewhat of a magical compound is glucose oxidase. It creates a chemical reaction, which, among other things in that colony, lowers the pH of honey down to an average of about 3.9 on the pH scale, which is really acidic. And it also produces hydrogen peroxide. And this hydrogen peroxide helps stabilize the nectar while it's going through the drying process so that we don't get an unwanted fermentation going on inside the colony. And it has antibacterial properties as well, as we well know of hydrogen peroxide. Diastase is an enzyme that we sort of use as a marker to show how much heat this honey has undergone in its life. When it's extracted, if it's been heated back up to decrystallize it, we can look at the diastase levels in there. It's quite often used in the industry as a marker, as I said, to show just how much heat this honey's had added to it. And we don't want to overheat honey. That destroys the natural enzymes in it and also helps degrade the flavor and usually darken the honey as well, which is not something we want to see on a table. Next slide, please. Honey, as I said, is a really healthy product. Local raw honey has been proven through studies by the British Journal of Medicine to help abate allergies. It's not a cold pill, mind you. You don't go take a teaspoon of honey and magically become immune to pollen allergies. But if you consume local raw honey over a period of time, the enzymes in the honey will naturally help you begin to form a resistance to these allergies. Raw honey is also an excellent burn ointment. It lessens the pain when it's applied to a burn, and it helps to keep those tissues moisturized and keeps them from drying out, which helps the healing process of the burn as well. It is an excellent wound ointment. Its wound healing abilities are widely known. As a matter of fact, in the absence of antibiotics during World War I, honey was widely used as a topical wound dressing and still is to this day. Honey releases hydrogen peroxide in contact with wound tissues, and because it's a supersaturated sugar solution, nothing will grow in it, no fungi, no bacteria. And also when you apply that to a wound, the nutrients, it can supply nutrients directly to those recovering cells. Next slide. And honey as a food product is a wonderful thing, as I said earlier. Counting calories, well, honey could be your sweetener. It's about 30% sweeter by volume than cane sugar, which means you use 30% less sugar to attain the same amount of sweetness in a beverage or whatever, on your cereal, your oatmeal, or your yogurt, as Laura mentioned earlier. It's a wonderful sweetener there. I love to use it as a sweetener for beverages. There's several restaurants around the country that are famous for their iced tea, and they don't freely divulge the fact that they sweeten it with honey, and that's why people seem to enjoy it so much. It is somewhat of a secret to the baking industry. The baking industry has used honey for decades because of its moisture-holding properties. Baked goods tend to stay fresh on the shelf longer, so these companies that make pound cakes and muffins and things like that are on the store shelf for weeks at a time will remain moist and fresh. And you can use those properties in your own baking. My wife utilizes a lot of honey in her baked goods. She makes a pound cake that's absolutely amazing, and I'll talk about where you can find that recipe later. And it's just some basics that we follow as far as using honey when we're cooking. Is we want to reduce our oven temperatures by about 25 degrees, and we want to reduce our liquid in the recipe by about a quarter of a cup to keep it from being too moist. But you will definitely enjoy honey's benefits in your baked goods. Next slide. We mentioned honey judging. We began a honey judge training program in 2000 at the Young Harris UGA Beekeeping Institute, and since then we have run several hundred people through this program. The program follows the judging format, which is used in the United Kingdom, Ireland, and several other European countries. It's a much more simple judging process than the American system that relies on polariscopes and different grade judging glasses and just a lot of different things. It's quite difficult to utilize the American system to judge honey. With the European style system, we can really effectively sort out and bring up the best honeys and be able to judge them fairly and properly. Next slide, please. When we're judging honey, we're judging it under a system for its marketability as a food product. So as such, we get a lot of comments about the strange garb that we wear, but it's really not strange at all because we are handling a food product. We will wear a sanitary head covering or hat, and we'll also wear a sanitary lab coat, very much like you'll see meat inspectors and dairy inspectors do in their industry inspections. And as a judge, we would look for primarily the sanitation of containers. We want to see a clean container, of course, no scratches, no dents. We want something that you would be proud to put on the shelf. When we open the container, we're going to be looking for off odors, off flavors, particulate matter, as you can see in that picture on the right there. We look for spoilage, which typically is displayed as fermentation. We looked at the container has a proper closure or lid on it, that it properly seals that container. And we look at the fill level. The fill level is an indicator of honesty by the producer that they're giving the customer their actual money's worth in that particular size container. And finally, we look at a marketable flavor. Is that a honey that someone would want to buy, someone would want to take home and use on the table? Our typical judging categories, we're judged would be light, medium, and dark extracted. And we separate the light, medium, and dark. That just means the color of the honey. We separate that out by using two grading glasses, which separate those three categories. We look at judging cut comb honey, which is actually taking sections of comb honey, cutting them square and putting them in a cut comb container. Chunk honey, which many of you are probably familiar with, that's where you'll buy a jar of honey that'll have a piece of comb floating in it. That is one of the hardest things to do in a honey show, is to properly cut that piece of comb and have it set in that jar and have it look right to the satisfaction of judges. And we do creamed honey. And creamed honey is simply, we take a honey that wants to crystallize quickly on its own, something like canola or cotton. Cotton makes wonderful creamed honey. And we control its crystallization process so that it sets up into a really tiny, grit-free crystal, and it's a solidified type honey, making lemonade out of lemons, if you will, with some of these ones that want to set up quickly. And it provides great table quality. We typically bestow awards out to 6 places in a honey show. We will have a category champion, and we'll also have a best show award in a honey show. These things are getting more and more popular. We have hundreds of entries now coming into our state honey shows. The Georgia Beekeepers Association has a fall honey show, which is the Georgia State Honey Show, each year at its fall annual meeting. And then in the spring, which the picture you saw a little bit earlier of myself and several other judges and stewards there, was the spring meeting, where it's an artisan show where we judge things that are made from honey, like mead and other beverages, baked products, candies, confections. A really neat show to judge in. And of course, judging sweets has its benefits, I guess you could say. So we'll move on to the next slide. Just a few facts about honey. Typical honeybee will visit 50 to 100 flowers during one collection flight from the hive. In order to produce this 1 pound container of honey, bees visited somewhere around 2 million flowers. Now, your average honeybee is only going to collect enough nectar in their lifetime to make 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey. So that shows you the number, not only the number of bees in a colony, but also the turnover in colony population. Those girls, once they become foraging bees, their life's pretty short. And during the nectar flow, a typical bee is only going to live from the time the egg is laid until the time she dies. She's only going to live about 6 weeks. Typical colony will produce during one nectar flow about 60 to 120 pounds of honey. Now multiply that out into the number of flowers that they visited. And your average bee in their lifetime to produce, a colony in their lifetime to produce a pound of honey, the bees are going to fly about 55,000 miles. Now, if I mentioned earlier, if you want to look at, and looks like my slide got cut off there, the National Honey Board is a great place to go and find recipes and educational materials related to honey. School teachers, even parents can go and download information and order information from the NHB, educational information to use. A lot of it's free that's online. Some of the brochures cost a very little amount of money, but it's a great source for those. There's thousands of recipes on there. For beverages, for baked goods, for all types of food products, for canning, making jelly, you name it, it's in there. Just a one-stop shop for those things. And it's just the website's www.nationalhoneyboard.com. You can just Google National Honey Board and get there. But it's a great resource area. And just a wonderful place to go and find those recipes we talked about, including my wife's pound cake recipe. And that's that for me.